Hi there. This is our second to last unit. Pretty amazing. I wanted to take a couple of minutes to chat a little bit about the O&M discussion, and especially because I'm a teacher of the visually impaired. I'm not an orientation mobility specialist. I've had a lot of really positive experiences for the most part with O&Ms, and I think that their instruction is really vital to our students' independence, and I think we can work with them very effectively. Share goals and motivate students to learn and do all that kind of good stuff. I've had a couple of incidences where I've had O&Ms not want to serve, students with multiple disabilities or younger students. And I think that can kind of color your worldview of kind of collaborating with people sometimes. But majority of my experiences have been really good. And I think it's important to understand, for us to understand their role and them to understand our role, of course, with the student. So it was a really great discussion. Everybody had, spot on ideas and kind of understood the benefits of collaboration and why we need to be a part of each other's, purview, and also understanding what's appropriate for the student and what they need to, what O&M can kind of do for our students. So I really appreciated everybody's experiences. I wanted to touch base on a couple of comments from the discussion that had come up, and I wrote on this discussion post of note. So Ashley had this really great story about, checking in with her O&M. That's there, checking in with her O&M. And seeing sort of what she could do to help with a student. And she really gave a great anecdote about just collaboration and motivating the student to move independently within his school routines. And she really took a leadership role there in working with an O&M, knowing that she would be able to kind of take on this responsibility. And I really appreciated that. So Ashley, thank you for that. For sharing that, because I thought that was a really great illustration of how we can collaborate to kind of motivate our students to learn. Lori had some really good comments just about kind of backing up the O&M, and then backing up you sort of as the professionals who work with students with visual impairments together and sharing that kind of expertise. I think that's really important. I think you need to, be careful that you, of course, are not making any recommendations that the O&M should or vice versa. But I do agree that it's really important to kind of back each other up and to, when you're part of conversations where maybe the O&M might not be able to be present or whatever the case may be able to say, you know what? Let me ask the O&M for some strategies here or some guidance, or let me bring them into the discussion to see what their perspective is on this. That's really great collaboration, and I really do think it's true that we have to definitely support each other in our roles. I don't know why my computer keeps doing this, I'm sorry. Ellen had a really interesting story about the TVI that she has gotten to know and work with, made comments about the folks on teams or whatever the case may be, saying, oh, well, the family can just do O&M. We don't need to give those services to the kid. The family can just do it. So that's really, that's disturbing, and I've heard the same thing. And of course, it's not true. So that's even more reinforcement of why it's so important for us to actually understand what O&Ms do, so that we can say, yeah, they work on really specific skills. That's not something the family has. A family can't teach a child to use a cane. They can help and they can reinforce things just the way that we can. They can collaborate just the way that we can. But the techniques, that technique work and foundational understanding of direction and spatial relationships and all of those type of things. Even the language. O&M really has a very consistent language used and that they use, and so not anyone just can do that. And a lot of the O&Ms I've known just very, very passionate about O&M, and really do have extremely good techniques and ideas on ways to kind of bring the environment to life in a way for folks with visual impairments that it's really fascinating to watch when you really get to work with a good O&M. So anyways, it doesn't just magically happen. Not anyone can understand how to be an O&M. And Stephanie had a disturbing comment that she's never seen any certified O&Ms with any of the students at her school. And so I would like to dig a little bit deeper there. And I think I asked in discussion, and apologies, I haven't checked it since then, but usually, especially if you see a child with a cane, your school district or whatever, like O&M should have given it to them. Nobody else can. So, if you have children who are totally blind, well, if they don't have an O&M, how are they getting around? And that being said, there are some laws, state laws about the provision of O&M services. So I just wanted to show you, this is from Texas, and I have to say, I have to plead my ignorance. I don't know which other states have these O&M regulations. School districts tend to sort of have their own, I think, clauses about it or rules. But in general, Texas has an extremely strong, of course, with TSBVI and their work in their regions, they have extremely strong, I think, vision services for students, and I really have always been on the forefront of providing them. And so this is a statute regulation of for O&M services, and I'll just kind of give you a summary, but basically it states that what O&M services are. They're to provide blind or visually impaired children by qualified personnel to enable those students to attain systematic orientation to and safe movement within their environments in school, home, and community. And really and then points out the concepts they need to use, and cane or service animals, and how students can understand and use their vision and distance, low vision, distance age aids, as well as other concepts, techniques, and tools. And so O&M has got to be considered for every child with a visual impairment in the state of Texas, as far as I know. And that's huge. That's really how it should be. And I will let you know that I've been in school districts, unfortunately, where O&M was not provided to all the students that it should have been. And either the O&M didn't have time, or there was no administrative support, or whatever the issue was. And then I've been in other places like the New Mexico School for the Blind, where every single one of our students at our early childhood programs receives O&M. Even if they can't walk, they receive O&M. Why? Because the understanding of the environment is crucial to development. And even children with multiple impairments need to understand spatial awareness and relationships and concepps and techniques that O&Ms can provide. So it's pretty important for every kid. And one of the reasons it's so important for every kid, I'm going to back up here. And again, this is just kind of, you guys have said quite a few of these things, and it's also just from my perspective, is that you just can't learn about the world unless you can access it. So very young children and infants, as they start to crawl and explore the world, they're motivated to go towards toys and things of interest, and they're motivated by their vision to do that. Our students, of course, our children don't always have all of that vision, and so how do they access the world? And an O&M can be really important. I mean, we've had in New Mexico, we have canes in the hands of babies before they can walk, so that they can get used to it. And so another thing is so that the family can get used to it, because it's a really big deal to have a white cane. And so that just sort of like social acceptance of it can take years, and so it's very important. The O&M is important because of community education. So understanding that, the lunch lady, the cooks in the kitchen, the folks at the bus driver, the folks who are crossing guards, there are all these people that really should understand, and you need to help them to understand what a student's abilities are, what they can do by themselves, because people always want to help our students, right? And as much as we appreciate that help, we want to be able to take a step back and say, you know what, so-and-so is building on this skill and independence. We really appreciate it. We're gonna cross the street, using his cane. I mean, whatever it is. Another reason, and I have this twice in here, but you really have to reinforce each other's instruction, and that came up quite a bit in the discussion, and I love that, because that's great. That's really building upon what the other professional is doing, and that's motivating and really relevant for the child and their experiences, right? So I've got two teachers. They're both working on these concepts. We're working on them in different ways so we can generalize them, and I think that's super helpful for everybody involved, for the student to make progress. Just like Ashley told us in her discussion post there, it helps for the student to advocate for independence themselves in the school community, right? So if we understand what the O&M wants, then part of that is kind of that self-determination piece, where we're letting the student understand what they're capable of, right? And what they need help with and what they're capable of, what they can do independently, and what skills they're building. For assessments, of course, this came up a lot, but it's in the discussion, but it's absolutely true. You're going to help them, the O&M, with their assessment. They're going to help you with yours, right? And maybe they're going to bring up some things you didn't think of, and vice versa. So collaborate together to create motivating lessons. At our early childhood program in New Mexico, if we're working on color recognition or we're working on, tactile strategies, we would marry that to whatever it was that the O&M was doing. If we're working on community helpers, then the O&M is working, in the hallways in the community to kind of put community helper themed lessons together, that kind of stuff. So all really, really, really important to work together, because ultimately you're just going to do better. You're going to get more achieved, and it's going to be more efficient if the child is exposed to it more. And then also meet the needs of the ECC, the needs and the goals of the ECC. So self-determination, independence, orientation, mobility, of course, all part of this, as well, and rec and leisure as well. Okay, and technology if you're using low vision aids or other all the great mapping apps and stuff that we have now. The O&M is all part of that work as well. So it's huge. It's huge. So I already told you about the law in Texas. And then this is just O&M law that also it tells when it's required within special education. Hold on 1 second here. Okay. So this is within IDEA. And this says what kind of person should conduct the O&M assessments, right? So it's somebody with a certification, okay? And when is it required to determine a child's eligibility for school district special education program on the basis of visual impairment? And so you've got to provide an orientation mobility evaluation if it's decided that that is something that's necessary, right? So very important. And the populations where it sometimes gets forgotten for is birth to 3 and children with multiple impairments. And this happens because many times people will say, well, they're not walking. Why would they need O&M? Well, as I explained before, O&M is really important to build spatial awareness and concepts, and there's no accessing the environment without it, right? So we really learn through the environment. We need to build up environmental cues and awareness in students, and we also need them to purposely interact with the environment and the community at large. And so, those are all really important things. If we've got a student who has, is multiply impaired, and we've determined, through the LMA, of course, that they need a functional literacy program. What does that look like? Where are those functional literacy signs in the environment that we need to point them to? Well, we're going to work with the O&M to do that, right? There are some really great resources this week for you in the module. Just talking about ECC, talking about assessments for other skills. I really just encourage you to keep these things as resources. You don't have to, commit them to memory this week, especially not it being one of the last weeks of the semester. But there's some great stuff in there on birth to 3, compiled and created and compiled by my staff and birth to 3 staff in New Mexico. That really does great stuff about, the type of things that we use for the ECC that apply to the birth to 3 population, because we need to get our kids started as soon as possible so that they can compete on an equal basis with their peers, and they need to start sooner than their peers start at working on these skills, because it's not going to just happen naturally. We've got to be there, and we've got to facilitate it for them. So anyways, thank you so much for listening. It was a great discussion. I've really enjoyed your discussions this semester. You guys have done great work, and I know that everybody's under some extra and added stress, and I appreciate you attending to your work and making the most out of it for each other. I really do. Okay, have a great week.